Fear is one of humanity's oldest and most primal emotions. We fear predators, heights, the dark, threats that can harm us physically. But some fears are more abstract, existing in the realm where the mind struggles to find purchase. Apeirophobia, the fear of infinity, is one of these. It's not just about fearing an endless life or the vastness of space. It's about the mind's fundamental inability to comprehend the concept of no end. When you truly try to imagine infinity, the mind recoils. There's a reason we created the concept of death, because the alternative is too terrible to bear. And then, there are liminal spaces, those eerie transitional places that exist in between. These spaces feel wrong because they exist on the boundary of purpose. An airport at midnight, an empty school during summer break. These places that were meant for transition now have been frozen in time. When these two concepts, the infinite and the liminal, intersect, they tap into something profoundly unsettling about human existence. We'll explore why we fear the endless, how liminal spaces embody this fear, and why they both have become powerful tools in horror media. The human mind craves boundaries. Look at any creation myth, and they almost all universally begin with formless chaos that gods must organize and limit. This, however, is no accident. Our brains are pattern recognition machines that evolved to find meaning and boundaries because they helped us survive. When confronted with infinity, this mental machinery begins to break down. There is no pattern to recognize and no boundary to identify. The brain enters almost an error state filled with anxiety, dread, and existential terror. Those who experience apeirophobia report intrusive thoughts that trigger spiraling anxiety, such as, what if I lived forever, watching everyone I love die repeatedly? Or, what if consciousness continues eternally? This creates what philosophers call cosmic vertigo, the feeling of being unmoored in an infinite universe. The mind, confronted with eternity, attempts to shut down rather than process what cannot be processed. The fear of infinity isn't merely philosophical, it manifests physically. Those with apeirophobia report panic attacks, night terrors, and debilitating anxiety when forced to contemplate endless existence. Children are especially vulnerable, often experiencing their first encounter with this fear around age 7 to 9, when they first truly comprehend the concept of forever. Parents report children waking in tears, unable to articulate the horror of everything going on forever. This developmental milestone represents the mind's first collision with a concept it cannot contain. If apeirophobia is the abstract fear of infinity, liminal spaces are its concrete manifestation. These transitional areas create a physical sensation of wrongness that mirrors the conceptual horror of eternity. The viral phenomenon of the Backrooms perfectly captures this horror. The original post describes accidentally no-clipping out of reality into endless yellow rooms with buzzing fluorescent lights. What makes the Backrooms terrifying, though, isn't just their emptiness, but rather their endlessness. The suggestion that you could wander forever through identical yellow hallways, never finding an exit. The modern world has created liminal spaces on an unprecedented scale. Structures designed for capitalism, such as malls, office buildings, and hotels, become increasingly unsettling when empty because their entire purpose has been removed. A shopping mall without shoppers is not just empty, it's purposeless. Like a body without a soul, it becomes uncanny. Our brain's fear center activates when we encounter something familiar but with crucial elements missing or wrong. This is the uncanny valley effect applied to spaces rather than faces, though. An empty mall is recognizable, yet wrong. It triggers our threat detection system without providing a clear threat to react to. Think about the last time you were in an airport at an odd hour. The feeling is unmistakable. A space designed for thousands that contain only a handful of people. The vast corridors that, during the day, efficiently channel human movement now yawn with emptiness. The ambient music that normally blends into background noise becomes jarringly prominent. Time itself seems to stretch and warp in these spaces, creating what sociologists call non-places. Locations where human identity and connection are temporarily suspended. The COVID-19 pandemic inadvertently created a global experiment in liminal aesthetics. As lockdowns emptied public spaces worldwide, social media filled with images of vacant shopping centers, deserted tourist attractions, and abandoned office buildings. These images provoked a collective unease that transcended practical concerns about the virus. We were witnessing our constructed environments stripped of their intended purpose, revealing their inherent artificiality and fragility. Liminal spaces share key characteristics that make them effective triggers for apeirophobia, such as emptiness where there should be people, artificial lighting creating unnatural shadows, and familiar yet wrong alterations to commonplace environments. The horror stems from the suggestion of infinity. A hallway stretching into darkness, or a fog so thick you can't see its boundaries. These spaces create the visceral sensation of being trapped in an endless loop, the physical manifestation of our fear of eternity. The internet has transformed our relationship with liminal spaces in 3 crucial ways. First, it has democratized their documentation, like anyone with a smartphone can capture and share these unsettling environments. Second, it has created communities centered around this aesthetic experience, validating and amplifying the emotional response. Third, and perhaps most significantly, it has itself become kind of a liminal space. Endless, purposeless scrolling through content with no clear beginning or end. Digital environments are particularly effective at triggering apeirophobia because they can violate physical laws. Video games can create spaces larger on the inside than outside. Digital corridors can repeat endlessly without logical contradiction. The internet itself is effectively infinite from a user perspective. You could theoretically click links forever without reaching an end to the web. The emergence of artificial intelligence has added yet another dimension to digital liminality. AI image generators like DALL-E and Midjourney excel at creating unsettling liminal spaces that never existed in physical reality. These spaces are doubly liminal, transitional areas created by systems that exist in the threshold between human and machine intelligence. Artists have also long recognized the power of liminal spaces to create profound unease. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining uses hotel corridors and massive empty rooms to create a sense of being lost in space and time, and even the Overlook Hotel seems to expand beyond physical possibility. David Lynch's Twin Peaks masterfully employs liminal aesthetics as well. The Red Room exists between worlds, featuring red curtains that extend indefinitely and a zigzag floor that seems to have no boundaries. Lynch, just like most of his projects, creates spaces that feel like nightmares where normal rules don't apply. Video games also have become particularly effective at simulating the experience of liminal infinity. The various Backrooms games trap players in procedurally generated yellow hallways that never end. These games don't rely on monsters or jump scares. The space itself is the monster. Hideo Kojima's Playable Teaser, or PT, remains one of gaming's most effective horror experiences despite consisting merely of a looping hallway that subtly changes with each iteration. The terror comes not from what appears, but from the violation of spatial logic, the impossible loop that traps the player in architectural recursion. Even analog horror series like Local 58 and the Mandela Catalogue use distorted broadcast footage and unsettling public spaces to create the sensation of reality breaking down. These works tap into apeirophobia by suggesting that what we perceive as reality might just be a thin veneer covering something endless and incomprehensible. Subreddits like Liminal Space collect photographs of empty pools, deserted malls, and fog-shrouded playgrounds. These images trigger a combination of nostalgia and dread that users describe as uniquely liminal. The rise of liminal aesthetics corresponds with significant cultural transitions. The abandoned shopping mall, perhaps the quintessential modern liminal space, represents the decline of physical retail in the digital age. These spaces embody economic and cultural liminality, stuck between their former purpose and whatever will replace them. Similarly, post-industrial spaces trigger liminal unease because they represent collective cultural transitions as well. The abandoned factory, for instance, stands as a physical manifestation of economic change, a space that once represented productive certainty, now embodying uncertainty about the future. So, why are we simultaneously repelled and fascinated by these concepts? Why do millions watch Backrooms videos or seek out liminal photography? Psychologist Carl Jung would suggest that we're attracted to these spaces because they represent the threshold to the unconscious, the boundary between what we know and what lies beyond our understanding. Like walking off the edge of a cliff, there's a thrill in approaching this boundary without crossing it. The existentialists argued that fundamental human struggle is finding meaning in a potentially meaningless universe. The concept of infinity exacerbates this struggle. If existence is endless, how can any action have significance? Yet, we're drawn to contemplate it anyway. There's also a collective cultural element. As modern life becomes increasingly structured and monitored, liminal spaces represent a kind of freedom, places outside normal rules and expectations. The nostalgia often associated with liminal imagery reflects a longing for spaces that haven't been fully commercialized. The internet's obsession with liminal aesthetics also connects to our relationship with technology. In a world where social media creates endless content streams without resolution, the liminal becomes a metaphor for our digital existence, the feeling of being trapped in spaces that seem to extend infinitely. Apeirophobia and liminal spaces reveal something fundamental about human consciousness. We need boundaries to function. The mind requires limits to create meaning. Without beginnings and endings, without thresholds and transitions, existence becomes not just frightening, but incomprehensible. Yet within this fear lies something profound. Our terror of infinity is also what drives us to create. Art, literature, music, film, these are all attempts to impose structure on chaos, to find meaning within the boundless. Horror as a genre doesn't just exploit these fears, it helps us process them. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of liminal spaces isn't their emptiness, but what they reveal about normal existence. The empty mall reminds us that the busy mall is just as constructed and just as artificial. The abandoned hospital corridor suggests that our institutions are more fragile than we admit. The liminal exposes the constructed nature of what we call reality. In confronting apeirophobia and liminal spaces, we're really confronting the limits of human understanding, the boundary between what can be known and what lies beyond comprehension. And in that confrontation, we discover something important about consciousness itself, that the mind, for all its power, remains finite in an infinite universe. The true horror and perhaps the true beauty of existence is that we are bounded creatures capable of conceiving the boundless. We can imagine eternity even though we cannot experience it. This paradox lies at the heart of human consciousness and at the heart of why liminal spaces and infinity continue to both horrify and fascinate us. Perhaps this is why we return to these images and concepts repeatedly, not just for the thrill, but because they offer a window into something fundamental about our existence. In the liminal, we glimpse both our limitations and our potential to transcend them.